you so much for coming out today and joining us. We're happy to see everybody, members and friends and board members. There's a little list of what we're going to do today. Welcome, the accomplishments, the elections. Then I'm going to turn it over to Woody briefly, and then Woody's going to turn it over to Dick briefly, and then we'll have our program speaker. I'm just going to run through the different committees that we have and what their accomplishments have been this year, or for 2025. And the Program and Events Committee is Rachel, Woody, Dick, and Jeanette. I hope I'm not forgetting anybody. If I am, somebody jump up and take credit. And you can see here's a number of things that happened. We try to do something almost every month, as you can see. Various groups coming, presentations, programs. Almost all of them were at Oakland, with the exception of the musical tribute to the Little Mountain Boys, which wasn't at Oakland. So keep your eye on our website for this coming year, and you can see all the programs that we have coming up for the new season, 2026. We have a collections committee, collections and exhibitions committee. Rachel, Doris, Beth, Becky, Rosemary, Jane, Debbie, Dick, and Liz. And in 2025, 61 new accession records, about 170 new items, a number of new exhibits, and a few highlights of collections that we added to our collections that were gifts of maybe some of you. We have a cadre of volunteers who help us keep the doors open. We're open on Wednesday afternoons to the public and Saturdays all day. Jeanette Kendi is our docent coordinator. So you can see many hours have been logged by volunteers and by board members, and Rachel gave me some information on what the collection volunteers have been doing, specifically helping support for exhibits and also housing for materials that are in the collections. But you can also, if you're not a collection volunteer, you could do other things. So please sign up to be a volunteer. You can do that on our website. We'd love to have you. So we have a sort of a publications committee these days. It's basically me and Becky, but our website has been being overhauled for the last 2 years, and our webmaster, Pat Wright, who you all might know, she used to live in the county, but she now lives in South Carolina, and she's been volunteering from afar. But we're very, very close to getting the website completely done. So the publications committee has the continuing quarterly newsletter, the Backroads monthly article by Lynn Coffey, and those are all on the website and are really, really good. They get posted the first of every month, and they're a wonderful resource. And then the website is, as I just said, almost done. Operations, our chair of the Building and Grounds Committee is Barda and Dick Whitehead, and many things happened last year. New LED lights installed in the third floor rooms and hallway made a big difference up there, especially for the volunteers. They know, they're able to see. The wastewater line dug up, lawn care, pest control, boxwood removal, a new larger roadside sign installed near the statues out front so that we can communicate better with people driving by at 65 miles an hour. So our finance committee is Becky Howard, Barb Delk, Bennett Saunders, Robert McSwain, and Grace Meyer. And I kind of broke it up into a few slides so that you can kind of absorb it a little bit. So that's income from January to December of 2025, $44,000. Then these are expenses, insurance, bookkeeping, repairs, utilities, usual stuff, $31,000 expenses. And then our assets are $307,970, and the net income was $21,000 when you take income versus expenses. The Planning and Development Committee is David Giles and Laura Purvis are the co-chairs. Woody, Christian, Becky Bennett, and Chris Baker are on that committee. And last year, multiple plans were created based on the projected needs, but to this point, no plan fostered enough agreement to move forward, so we're still continuing to discuss the future direction of an addition to Oakland. Stay tuned for that. All right. Any questions about our accomplishments or anything anybody wants to say? Thank you so much to everybody who attended events, who volunteered for events, who's on the board. So we really, really appreciate you, and we couldn't do it without you. Okay, now it is time for an election of the board members and officers. There was a nominating committee this year, and that was me, Chris Baker, and Doris Delk. So there are 5 board members whose 3-year terms are expiring, and we are lucky that all 5 of them agreed to serve again. So all 5 of those people are starting a fresh term of 3 more years. And then the officers, these are year-long terms, and I am so happy to say that Rachel Deddens, who is our archivist, sorry, Rachel, right past you, has agreed to move into the role of president. Woody has been serving as vice president for the last part of last year after Susan Gardner left, so he moved into that role. Becky Howard, treasurer, and Jeanette Kendi, secretary. So that is the slate of officers that we're going to vote on today. I guess we just do if you're take nominations from the floor. I'm supposed to take nominations from the floor for a nomination to vote on this slate of officers. Do I have a nomination? Or do I nominate and you, do I?
Does anybody want to nominate anybody else for those positions?
There we go. Does anybody want to step forward and want to be president instead of Rachel? Okay, so I'm putting forth this slate of officers, or the nominating committee is putting forth this slate of officers. Do I have a motion to vote on this slate of officers?
So moved.
Gail, thank you. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Great. Thank you so much. And now, okay, now I'm going off my script a little bit. I'm going to turn things over to...
Well, first, you should have a separate motion to continue the people who...
Oh, this group.
Yes.
So the nominating committee proposes this group be nominated or be voted on again for 3 more years, 3-year terms going forward. Do I have a motion to do that?
So moved.
Okay. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Okay. Thank you. I don't really know my Rogers Rules of Orders, obviously. Okay, so now I'm turning it over to Woody. Do you want this?
I'll use this. Can you hear me? I just want to say a word about Rachel, who has been president for how long now?
Heather.
We're talking about Rachel next year. Heather.
I can't remember, it's 4 years.
3 to 4 years. in that time, she has spent a lot of time with Pat Wright revising the website. The old website was a little clumsy to navigate, and you might think it's real easy to just move to a new format. It ain't easy. They work with a company that does this kind of thing, and it was frustrating, to say the least. I don't recall how many times Rachel said, another 2 weeks and we'll be done. That went on for about a year, I think. But it is 95% done, and now there's moving images onto it, which we're meeting about on Tuesday to see how we can expedite that. Heather's been wonderful about giving her professional advice as a librarian at the University of Virginia on how to manage collections, and I know Rachel agrees with that sentiment. It's not easy to track all of these collections and how to manage them so that they're accessible and will be accessible through the website, things like that. She delegates. Most presidents do delegate stuff, but some do it with a gentle touch and others are not so gentle. I would say that she does a very gentle job of urging the committees to do their work. The committee system has been functioning pretty darn well because the society is doing pretty well, both financially and from the perspective of running programs and getting new things into the collections. Every time we meet, somebody has to put an agenda together. That's done by Heather with the executive committee. She runs meetings very expeditiously. It's 8 o'clock and we're done. They start at 7, so they're done. That helps people want to attend the meetings because they're not going to go on forever. She's also our resident expert on Zoom. We have Zoom meetings of the executive committee, and we've done Zoom meetings for various purposes before. And I found out at the Dolores Truesdale event that many of you attended that she's a very good dancer. And I have video proof of that. So we wanted to thank you for your years of service. We have something for you. Thank you so much. Round of applause. And now I'll turn it over to Dick to introduce Randy Lichtenberger.
Good afternoon. Those who don't know me, I've been around this a little while and just happen to be in love with this board. I think y'all do such a great job. The whole organization is good to the county and good for the county, I believe. Anyway, good afternoon, members, and to our guest here today. It's my honor to introduce a keynote speaker, Randy Lichtenberger. I first met Randy in Lynchburg 10, 12, maybe 15 years ago. I can't tell you how long it's been. He and I were contracted to the Department of Water Resources for a project in Lynchburg, and it was in downtown Lynchburg. My part was just to inspect construction that was being done to replace a large sanitary sewer line, which ran through the lower basin, just, right in toward the river from downtown Lynchburg. The expectation was to find a treasure trove of artifacts while we were doing the excavating for this, in the abandoned, and it was dug through the abandoned James and Kanawha Canal, which is where the pipe was buried, the sewer line through Lynchburg. Randy headed a team to curate any discovered artifacts. And so that's how I got to know him. The number of discoveries were fewer than we expected, but they certainly added to the storied history of Lynchburg in the post-Civil War era. The discoveries were clean, brought back to life, researched, age-dated, and identified as period flatware, bottles, and random metal, and a number of other things. These stained, dirt-caked, almost unidentifiable broken shards tell many stories about life in Lichtenberger. At our Cabellsville site, Randy's team included Jessica Gansert, who played an important role in that work. Jessica, unfortunately, can't be with us here today, but the two of them worked their magic to answer a half-century-old mystery. Where exactly was the Cabellsville site, which was a courthouse and a small community? Randy has a master's degree in anthropology from William & Mary. He holds 2 jobs that I know about that are so intertwined I can't really understand how he does them or what they actually are. He is a regional archaeologist for the Virginia Department of Transportation, and he's the Director of Cultural Resources for Hurt and Profit in Lynchburg. He has 30 years experience as a professional archaeologist. Jessica has a master's degree in applied anthropology. She has 14 years experience with Hurt and Profit in Lynchburg, working with Randy. I find it interesting that both Jessica and Randy are current members of the Ethics Committee for the Council of Virginia Archaeologists, where Randy is the current chairman. Both have numerous honors and accolades in their professional careers. So with that being said, I'm going to turn the program over to Randy, who will share the numerous facts about the small but vibrant community that sprang up and disappeared right in our midst during the late colonial period. Cabellsville has a big story to tell. Please welcome me and join me in welcoming Randy to tell the many stories about Cabellsville.
Well, thank you all for having me here today. I appreciate the invitation. I just want to say, Dick, talking about that the CSO Canal project reminded me of, it was an interesting project, right? Because we were down there part of the time, but the excavations were happening part of the time when we weren't there. And so we were relying on folks to kind of pick up artifacts and put them in buckets for us. And I just remember, Dick took that very seriously, and every week or so we'd have a big bucket of artifacts to look through, and tons of stuff, lots of bottles, old bottles, 19th century to the early 20th century, pieces of wood, leather, little pieces of ceramic, all that kind of stuff. And I'll tell you, if it wasn't for him, a lot of that material would have just been lost to time forever. So I really appreciated his help on that. And I know you all appreciate all his help up here. Dick alluded to Jessica not being here today. And it was a little touch and go right up until this morning, because Jess she's 13 days from giving birth. And she wouldn't mind me saying this, but she's huge. The girl is basically round right now, and if you know her, she's a tiny girl, so she's kind of like a beach ball right now. And she couldn't walk yesterday, then she couldn't walk yesterday, and she said, I might be there. And I was like, well, don't push it. Any chance of anything going on? But luckily, she sent me a copy of her presentation and her slides, which I've worked into the presentation here. And we'll talk about that at the end. The last time I talked about Cabellsville, I believe it was to this group, it was in 2017, so it's been a few years since I really thought about it or talked about it. I mean, it's on my mind, but, and I think at that point, perhaps Jessica hadn't finished her work at the jail site yet, or at least hadn't processed everything. So and that will at least be new material at the end. I hope you'll enjoy seeing some of that. Now, the last time I presented, I was able to co-present with Keith Adams, who co-directed the survey with me, and sadly Keith passed in May of 2020. I know he'd be pleased that his work is still being shared, and certainly would have enjoyed being here with you today. Let's see. So I'll just dive right into it. This is going to be kind of two talks. The first part I'm going to kind of read at you a lot to establish some background material on Cabellsville. A lot of you may be familiar with that, some of you may not. So we'll get right into it. We conducted the archeological survey at Cabellsville beginning in the fall of 2013. We wrapped up field work on part 2 of the survey in the spring of 2016. And before I begin, I'd like to thank our numerous sponsors for that dig once again, and volunteers, some of the folks in this room, in fact, among them. These include the Virginia Department of Historic Resources Threatened Sites Fund, which gave us 2 generous grants for the work. That's what funded it. Also Sweetbriar College and Hurt Profit, both of which donated part of their services to the project. I'd also like to thank the former owners of the Cabellsville site for granting us permission to conduct the survey and for their kind hospitality throughout the process. And finally, we owe a great debt to the more than 30 volunteers from the Archaeological Society of Virginia, the Council of Virginia Archaeologists, and the surrounding communities who not only made the work possible, but whose company made it a pleasure to undertake. Let's see if I can figure out how to advance. Cabellsville is the historical name of the first Amherst County Courthouse village, founded in 1761. The site, which was the thriving center of county government for nearly 50 years, is now located on a small farm in southern Nelson County. There are no extant structures of the courthouse period, but for many years, the owners of the site have encountered large numbers of handmade bricks and artifacts of the village period during gardening and other earth-moving activities. In 1761, Amherst County was formed from the southern half of Albemarle County. This was part of a long-standing pattern of creating smaller counties to better serve Virginia's steadily increasing population throughout the colonial period. First several meetings of the court were held at Henry Key's Ordinary. This existing structure served until such time as the county settled on a location for the courthouse and completed its construction. Until we began our work, there was a commonly held assumption that Key's Ordinary was located on the land that would become Cabellsville. But thanks to prompting from Dick Whitehead, we've re-examined the historical research and concluded that Key's Ordinary was located a few miles east of Cabellsville, closer to present-day Arrington. While it is true that the early court met at Henry Key's, county leaders settled on a site that was located near the center of a 1,070-acre tract owned by Philip Grimes, Esquire, and Lunsford Lomax, the younger, of the County of Caroline. The courthouse was erected there in 1762, and according to a WPA account, the building finally succumbed to fire in 1917 or 1918. Lomax and the executors of Grimes sold the parcel to Richard Alcock of the County of Caroline on April 3rd, 1769. That deed states that it is the land whereon the Amherst Courthouse now stands. So pretty good evidence, right? An entry in the diary of William Cabell, dated 1771, states that on December 9th, he paid Richard Alcock, the ordinary keeper at the courthouse, 20 shillings balance in full of his expenses at the election. We don't know yet whether Alcock was invested in keeping the ordinary prior to purchasing the courthouse land, but this entry shows the powerful economic incentive to hosting the center of county government. And we see that repeated in other counties as well. Usually, when they wanted to set up the new county courthouse, it was frequently it was near the geographical center of the county for everybody's convenience. But if you look more closely at that, it's often on a large landowner's holding, and very often there's already a tavern or some other, like a store or something located there. So there's definitely a financial interest in that. Alcock and his wife Francine would sell the land to William Cabell Jr. on May 8th, 1772 for 800 pounds. We've learned that the tavern was being kept by William Pollard by 1774, presumably at Cabell's request. Since the early village was not incorporated and the land remained as a large parcel in the hands of a succession of private owners, there are no deeds for individual lots. And that's a real handicap when you're researching properties. That really hurts. No plat depicting the entire town has been located to date. Excuse me, but a 1790 plat of a prison-bound survey gives crucial clues to the organization of the courthouse landscape. And we'll take a look at that. So the prison bounds were marked off according to Virginia law to provide space for nonviolent offenders such as debtors to move about freely during the day as long as they return to prison each night. That goes really kind of against the concept of prison the way we think of it in those days. For debtors, the privilege also allowed them to undertake work, often in county workhouses, to pay down their debts. The boundaries usually included between 2 and 10 acres and typically encompassed the jail, the courthouse, and a source of fresh water such as a well or a spring. The prison bounds plat for Cabellsville depicts 2 structures, the jail and a house of office or privy. And you can see, I don't know if you can see these very well. This would be the jail right here. A fence is shown extending northeastward from the privy along one line of the survey. Since none of the buildings are extant and prison bounds are often follow new survey lines, it is fortunate that the plat includes a spring at the head of a branch, because today there's only 2 springs located near the present site, one on the southeast side of the ridge and one to the northwest side. And I think Jess's part talks about that a little bit more, but we were able to use the springs to help us out. And here's an overview. This aerial photo depicts that 1790 prison bounds plat, suspected location of the privy and jail, and then this current spring at the top left corner over there. Scaling the prison bounds plat to match a modern aerial photo and overlaying it reveals that only the northwest spring makes sense as the one depicted in 1790. Using the spring to the southeast would place the prison and environ squarely on the side of a steep northwesterly slope. And using the northwest spring puts the boundaries roughly around the current farmyard where the courthouse is thought to have been. The jail depicted on the 1790 plat is at least the 3rd one to be erected at the courthouse. What is assumed to have been the first jail burned in November 1767, killing a debtor named John F. Gregory. The county decided to replace the building with one measuring 34 feet long, 16 feet wide, and 8 feet high with 8-inch thick walls. In 1774, bids were requested for a 3rd jail. This one was to measure 37 feet long by 22 feet wide with 3-foot thick walls, so they're getting bigger. It was to be constructed of brick and timber. It's unknown whether the jails occupied the same site, but at least the 2nd and 3rd versions are likely to have left a substantial archaeological footprint, a footprint that we'll see part of soon. Most of the background material, I promise. Upon William Cabell Jr.'s death, the property passed to his son, Samuel Jordan Cabell, by will dated April 16, 1798. Samuel successfully petitioned to have the town chartered as Cabellsville in 1803. It then consisted of 25 acres. However, the extent to which those acres were developed is unknown. In hindsight, it was too late to ensure the future prosperity of the village. In 1807, Nelson County was formed from the northern portion of Amherst County, and the new county took in land north of the Tye River, including the site of Cabellsville. There's evidence that this split may have occurred much earlier. Get a little water. There's evidence that this split may have occurred much earlier had it not been for the efforts of William Cabell Jr. In 1778, the parishes of Amherst County were split along the same lines, and it was customary for the division of counties to follow soon thereafter. However, Cabell successfully opposed several efforts to divide Amherst, including one in the fall of 1785. Angered by the failure to divide the county in 1785, in 1786 the group of citizens tried unsuccessfully to have the courthouse removed from Cabell's land. Two maps dated 1794 and 1807 attest to the courthouse's location in present-day Colleen. So we have good evidence that it was not removed before 1807. Just as the newly formed county of Amherst needed a central administrative center in 1761, the fledgling county of Nelson looked to a more convenient location further to the north of Cabellsville. The leaders of Nelson County continued to meet at Cabellsville until 1810, when a new courthouse was completed at Livingston. Cabellsville never recovered from the loss of its status as the seat of county government. The town fell into decline, and by the mid-19th century it became the site of the Wills Plantation. More research is needed on the courthouse period, but as you can imagine, much occurred at the site during the 18th century. We assume for the purposes of our survey that the courthouse, lawyers' offices, jail, stores, taverns, and perhaps some private homes all stood in close proximity to one another. Thomas Jefferson, as a young attorney, is known to have practiced law at this location, and doubtless many prominent people, including members of the Cabell family, were involved in business at the county seat. The Amherst County Militia also mustered at the courthouse green during the Revolutionary War, when the village became a hub of activity. Deed records show that Samuel Jordan Cabell's son, William S. Cabell, and his wife Elizabeth sold the site to Willis H. Wills on October 3, 1831. The tract had expanded by then to include over 1,400 acres. A series of Civil War period maps depict the location of the Wills home. The Wills would go on to subdivide the property during their tenure, most notably in 1870, as noted on a plat in the Nelson County Courthouse. A road trace running east-west through the north side of the present home lot and a portion of the present driveway correspond to the location of the old Amherst Courthouse Road noted on that plat. After passing by inheritance through the Wills family, the property was sold again in the late 19th century. A succession of over half a dozen owners between then and the late 20th century shaped the property into its present 89.6 acre configuration. And that was, in 2017, it was 89.67 acres, so I'm assuming that's still the case. Throughout these many transfers, the one constant was that the main dwelling house remained near its present location. The only change, alluded to earlier, was when the old Wills home burned. According to a neighbor, Ms. Dorothy Giles, the Wills house burned down on January 15th, 1917. And you might wonder why she remembered the exact day that the courthouse burned down. It's an event remembered in her family because it occurred on the night her sister was born. So that would kind of put it permanently in memory, I think. A new farmhouse was built very close to the old foundation and is the same structure with additions that's presently occupied. Oral history holds that the old Wills home was the former courthouse itself. The previous property owners have recovered many 18th and 19th century artifacts through gardening and yard work. They also encountered brick foundations and brick walkways just beneath the ground surface surrounding their home. An area adjacent to the north side of the current house was known in family oral history as the site of the lawyer's office. So here's a picture from probably 2016 16, 15. Let's see. The site core straddles the top of a ridge running northeast to southwest. Springs on the northwest and southeast sides of the ridge empty into two unnamed tributaries of Black Creek, which in turn flows into the Ty River, approximately 2.2 miles southwest of the site. Most of the site today consists of hay fields and is otherwise not actively farmed. A cluster of structures lie at the core of the site in the vicinity of the old courthouse. These include a circa 1920 farmhouse and several barns. A circa 1940s tenant house lies in ruins to the southeast side of the ridge near one of the historic springs. Here you can see views of the barns. The wood pile. Now this is looking main house to the left side of that photo. And another shot from the barns looking toward the main house. The goal of the archaeological survey was to identify the presumed location of the Cabellsville archaeological site, define site boundaries, and begin to evaluate site integrity. The survey methodology employed to meet this goal was based on the fact that the previous landowners had recovered a large quantity of artifacts and had identified brick walkways and potential brick foundations in the immediate vicinity of their home. Oral and written history corroborates the suspicion that the courthouse village was centered near the present dwelling. So Herd Prophet determined that an archaeological survey beginning at the nucleus of the present farmstead and expanding outward from it would be the most efficient means of identifying the site. And to that end, H&P survey, our survey department first established a site grid with stakes laid out 200-foot intervals across the ridge. And you can see in this photo here that one of our control points is at each one of these little grid points here. We established a datum as north 2,000, east 2,000 feet, just to the north of the farmyard, and fiberglass tapes were pulled between stakes to establish shovel test pit locations at 50-foot intervals across the site. The survey resulted in the excavation of 110 shovel test pits, 87 of which were positive for cultural material. So that's a pretty high rate of return. As expected, the highest artifact concentrations are located close to the existing house where the landowners traditionally found cultural material. Several features were located in shovel tests and others had been discovered by the landowners. And here you can see everybody is very interested in one of the features that we found. It was just a hole that just kept going down, 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 and was just chock full of brick and artifacts. So that gathered a crowd. A deep brick rubble-filled feature, which you see here, was discovered through shovel testing at the west end of the current garden. The uppermost stratum consisted of 0.85 feet of rototilled garden soil. It contained several shards of bottle glass, brick, mortar, and an unidentified ceramic sherd. The A layer was underlain by compact, redeposited red clay subsoil that contained brick flecking. This fill layer extended to 1.2 feet below ground surface. Layer C consisted of a thick deposit of brick and mortar rubble in a matrix of dark reddish-gray clay loam that extended to a depth of 3.1 feet below ground surface. And here you can see down into that hole a little bit. Excavators could no longer reach at that point and used a corer to a depth of 3.9 feet, finally being stopped by a piece of brick, as evidenced by red powder on the rim of the corer. So we never did reach the bottom of that. Layer C contained brick, lime mortar, bottle glass, and a cut nail. And the feature was interpreted, as you might suspect, as a potential building site. Slide 15. Shovel testing also revealed a potential structure in the east side yard of the present house in the purported location of the old Wills home that had burned in the early 20th century. Shovel test 16 was the first of the group to be excavated. We discovered 2 layers of rubble just beneath the sod. An A layer, 1.5 feet. I'm going to skip some of this because it's archaeology jargon. You don't need to know what color soil it was. This layer contained a large variety of domestic and architectural artifacts, including handmade bricks, lime mortar, rock cut and wire nails, pearlware, bottle glass, and window glass. It also contained numerous pieces of sheet metal roofing. The fact that many artifacts were burned seems to corroborate the burning of the Wills' home. The most significant aspect of the second layer was the presence of a high concentration of burned lime mortar throughout. It also contained large fragments of burned brick and artifacts, most notably part of a porcelain teacup near the base. The layer ended on very compact red clay subsoil. H&P interpreted the brick rubble as potential cellar fill associated with the house. The initial survey resulted in the recovery of over 700 counted artifacts, including a wide variety of glass and ceramics, bullets, many varieties of nails, kaolin pipe stems, and a 1780 Spanish half real, pictured here. In addition, hundreds of pounds of brick and mortar were weighed and discarded in the field, with samples taken for the lab as appropriate. The ceramic assemblage was predominantly comprised of creamware and pearlware, with several sherds of Delft, a good indication of the courthouse village period. However, as most of the artifacts were recovered from a mixed age horizon, later whitewares were also present, along with yellowware and ironstone. Here you can see some of the nails. The nail assemblage was dominated by cut nails. Wrought and wire nails were also present in good quantities, with the majority of wrought nails recovered from features in the vicinity of the burned Wills' home. So, wrought nails, you're going to get your cut nails after about 1800 or so. Your wire nails come in, they become predominant in the 1870s, to just give you an idea. So, if you're looking for colonial period stuff, you should only have wrought nails in your assemblage. The site was found to cover a minimum of 4 acres, including the entire farmyard and fields immediately surrounding it. Adequate site boundaries were not established during the first year of survey due to the sheer size of the site and the depth and complexity of several of the shovel tests. We presume that the site continues to both the west, southwest, and northeast along the ridgetop and the location of the old stage road. Although not tested, steep slopes to the northwest and southeast of the farmyard form the boundary in those directions. We then obtained a second grant to shovel test further to the west and northeast of the site. And I'll discuss those results shortly. First, let's look at what the first season revealed in terms of the location of potential structures. So here we've got plotted out in orange are locations of what we believe were structures, 18th century structures. The blue rectangle on there is the present home. And then take a look. The way we plotted those, most of those structures had either brick foundations or they were entirely constructed of brick. So when we excavate in the field and weigh the number of bricks, how much brick there is in each of our shovel tests, we can then plot that out. And you can see here the distribution by weight of the bricks. All of these peaks in the lower diagram are where we had lots and lots of bricks compared to other spots. And so those, and there's a kind of a heat map of it. And these are what we presume to be structural locations. And there's the boundary of the jail again. And here we are with some of we're matching up that boundary with some of our brick locations. And if you look, and sure enough, so we've got the privy in this corner, and we've got a little concentration of brick over here. And we've got the jail over here, and another big concentration of brick with the jail location. Very good. And then we put in some test units. These were 5 by 5 foot squares that we excavated stratigraphically And these were located in the presumed location of the first courthouse. And if we look at one of these on the ground, you can see there's Keith Adams, one of our students here. Down in the lower left side of this photo, you can see there's a brick paving right there. That seems to be maybe just outside the courthouse foundations. Lots of stuff in the upper layer. This turned out, I think, to be part of the bed frame that had been in there. So you have to understand when you're looking at these buildings, we think this was the first courthouse, but of course it became a family home later on. So people are living in here in the early part of the 20th century. So imagine what's inside this building. It's not courthouse furniture anymore. It's their personal furniture and all their belongings. So when one of these buildings burns or gets torn down, we often find a whole ton of Victorian period artifacts in an 18th century building. So archaeologically, we have to be thinking about not only when it was built, but when did it come down? And how do we figure out if this is the building or is it just an early 20th century house, right? So you can't look at just the things that you find in the upper fill, like the Victorian teacups and all that kind of stuff. You have to look at the architectural materials. And even then, let's say you've got an 18th century building, it's got all wrought nails, it's got, handmade hinges and all that kind of hardware. What did people do? They would add on to the building, they'd repair things over time. So very often you're going to find later period stuff mixed with it. So a lot of times we're looking at, if we get 100 nails, are they 80% wrought nails? Well, that's a pretty good indication it's an 18th century building that has later repairs and things. So that's the kind of stuff we're always looking at. Here's another picture of the bed frame over top of the paving. And here's a photograph. This is interesting because it's the unit right here is starting to dive downward. And that's really interesting to us because it indicates there might be a cellar hole here. And here's this very young Jess Ganser, back when she was still a student. So this is kind of cool. We get down into this unit a little bit deeper. This is where we started seeing some burn stuff, and we started seeing some of the roof materials. You see it had a tin roof at that point. That's all this material over here where the roof collapsed. And then when we got down into the very bottom, we found a trench, and sure enough, we had intact bricks here. In a trench that had been robbed out, right? People had used this after the fire, apparently went in there and said, well, I can use these bricks, and they started digging them out. But they didn't take all of it. They left behind that little tiny section there. That is what we know so far to be the surviving part of the first courthouse foundation. Not seen in over 100 years when we dug it up. So. Pretty sure that's it. And here you can see another view, and this shows you that thick layer of burning in that black up in the corner there, just almost pure charcoal. So if you imagine, a building burning, you get all that burned material down, compressed into the bottom, then you've got a bunch of other stuff, and then finally the roof falls, and you've got the roof material. You can kind of imagine it just pancaking into the hole here. This is one of my favorite artifacts from the dig, because I just think it's really neat. The only part of this plate that we found is over here on the right, and we were able to identify it from the pattern and from the back stamping right here. And it's a view of the dam and waterworks in Philadelphia. It's a pattern that was popular in the 1820s, so after the courthouse period when people started using the old courthouse as a family home. But the thing that I find fascinating about this, can you imagine today if you went into the store and you were buying a new china pattern, and you had something that had some pictures of public works on it. You know, here's the Lichtenberger wastewater facility. That's beautiful. Now I should get the whole set. It just blows my mind that, you know, at that point in this country, we're so proud of our public works, right? And things were made not only to be functional, but to look nice. That they would go on china that you use on your dining room table. I love that. So here is, now this is part 2 of our survey. And what we did, effectively, we just expanded what we had done the first year. And if you look at the yellow, that's as far as we were able to test during that first season. And then off to the sides here, inside the red, is where it slopes down to either side. And we thought, well, there's probably pretty low potential in these areas, right? Because it's so slopey, it's unlikely they would have built on it, at least originally. And then here you've got the old courthouse road coming through. So we said, well, you know, it's pretty flat here. We're going to follow the road out, excavate on both sides. And there's an extension over here that's fairly flat, and so we'll go off that way. And that's about what we had time to work on. And here's just a view. This is looking sort of eastward down the road, which we presume is the old courthouse route. So we did, you can see how steep it is over here. So we were mostly up in the field on the left. And here's some of our folks out here, some volunteers in the tall grass, some more shovel testing. And we put all the soil through our shaker screens as we went. And here you can see the results of the first and second year of survey put together. Now, it may be a little hard to see from the back, but if you look at all the green dots on there, those are all shovel tests that had artifacts in them, which you can tell is almost all of them. So you know, lots and lots of positive shovel tests. The negatives are in red, and then we had a couple of yellows that were not excavated, and we did have a few prehistoric or pre-contact period Native American artifacts in a few of these tests up here in the field. This is not at all unusual. There's a spring up over that way. The other area that we went back to during the second year was in the garden, where we had found all those bricks, that really deep brick feature. And you can see here, Keith Adams is looking over this trench, and what we had done is we laid out 2-foot wide trenches in a cross pattern, hoping that if you had foundation walls, that one of those were going to catch a wall in one direction or another. And here you can see we're proceeding along, and this darker section from about here all the way almost to that end is just all fill. Another view as that proceeds, and you can see the Andersons had their garden growing, so we were trying not to trample all of their vegetables. They were real troopers about it, but I felt bad that we had to get in there at all. And then you can see, this is one of the more curious artifacts that we found. And this, it's something that Poplar Forest is familiar with. There's these handmade smoking pipes. These are carved out of steatite or soapstone. And this looks like the blank for one. It's very reminiscent of the shape of the finished ones. They're usually kind of squarish. And somebody had been carving those. Now, it was over in the vicinity of the jail. So it may have been a prisoner, sitting there kind of whittling away, making a pipe, or it could have been part of a home industry, that kind of thing. Here we have what's called a boss, probably for a door, potentially for a jailhouse door or something substantial. We've got a button here and a cut real, or what people call piece of 8, that kind of thing. Pure silver, Spanish, which was very common in colonial currency. Some more artifacts that are hardware related. And I know Jess is part of the presentation. She's going to talk about this guy right here, so I won't tell you what that is. There's a hook and some nails, and I'm not sure what that lob is. Part of a brass buckle, probably a shoe buckle. And then this picture I brought from the News in Advance. I think they did a little story on the dig, and this was one of our volunteers holding up a very decorative little drawer pull, brass drawer pull. All right, so I'm going to go into Jess's stuff. And let's see her first slide. Some of this may be a little redundant, and you'll have to excuse me because I'm working from Jess's notes. So she said that she has a few things about the jail. So this is the 1794 Morse County map that shows Cabellsville as the county seat of Amherst. She says there are no deeds for individual plots, but would have contained municipal buildings, lawyers' offices, and at least one ordinary for court days, as well as the jail, which at that time was spelled G-O-A-L. Cases were only heard during court days, so people were held in the jail until then. Sentences were typically physical punishments, except for death, or fines, so people didn't stay in the jailhouse for very long, typically. Virginia colonial law required a curtilage around the jail, mostly for debtors to sell their trades, to pay off imprisonment fines. People were required to spend the nights in jail, and the sheriff locked them up every night. Food and supplies were not provided by the county, so they needed to be brought in for people while awaiting trial. So you can imagine you were at the mercy of your relatives and friends to bring you food while you were in jail. Must have been fun. Most all legal cases were handled at the county level except for felonies like murder or horse theft, which were at the time heard in Williamsburg. So here is a picture of the jailhouse map again. Under the jail. The top left dot is the post near the spring, as indicated on the map. And the bottom dot is the post near the House of Office, which is a fancy name for the outhouse. Plate. Okay. So then we've got locating the jailhouse by maps. We did a digital overlay, used the earlier excavations to place the general area of the courthouse. Used the springs. We talked about some of this already. And then Jess talks about the locating the jailhouse by the STP survey. The large amount of brick rubble found in SDP 42, which gave us the approximate location of the jailhouse, located in the modern garden. Okay, now we're getting into it. We placed the trench in the probable 1790 jail location in 2015. You can see, I think that's me down in it, Keith and Jess up at the top. We recovered large amounts of brick and few artifacts. Brick amounts of 200 plus pounds per unit, so that was moving a lot of bricks. Consistent with an all brick structure. Few artifacts were also consistent with other jailhouse sites because people generally left very little behind when imprisoned and were only there for a short while. So you're not going to get something like you would find at a domestic site where people are living full time. Some of the artifacts, okay, this is again the the slide I had, and she says the large round iron plate is similar to a door pintle. As the bottom of the door would balance on this plate and swing freely from the hinges. So we think that may be for the very heavy jailhouse door. All right, then we get into her thesis project, which she did in 2018. And you can see here some of the units she opened up. First thing that jumps right at you is all this brick in here. And that is the actual remainder of one of the jail foundations. So she says, we returned to the site in 2018 for her thesis project and placed 5x5 excavation units near the 2015 trenches where the property owner had dug up a corner of a brick structure during fence post construction. And you can see the hole in the leftmost corner, which is, I think she's got that backwards, it's right here. So once again, you know, we were just following in the footsteps of the people who owned it, who already knew better than us. They're like, oh yeah, there's a building right there, because we dug it up in the fence post hole. So all right, so we'll go look at it. And what we found was a 12-foot by 20-foot foundation with approximately 50 pounds of brick per unit. And we found all wrought nails, no cut or wire. So if we go back to what I said earlier, that talks about an 18th century building with no time for renovations, right? So a few architectural artifacts were found consistent with order book rulings to recover and reuse all possible materials from an earlier jailhouse. And then she says we found 3 coins, a quartered real that was undateable, and 2 1773 Virginia half pennies. You can see one of the half pennies here. These coins, dated 1773, were minted in England and imported to Virginia just before the Revolutionary War. Aside from a large cache of coins that was found in Williamsburg, few of these have been found on other sites to date. Let's see. They were meant to be an early attempt at representative currency like modern dollar bills, but never made it to wide circulation before the war broke out. We conserved this in-house at our laboratory and earned profit. And then she talks about, so I'll give you some chemistry. These were first soaked in 5% sodium sesquicarbonate solution. Jess is a conservator, so I think she probably thinks this is more interesting than it is. Not to be rude, don't tell her I said that. So I'm not going to read you about the sesquicarbonate solution. Suffice to say that we processed all of these in lab to bring them back to some legible state. And here's just a little bit. Now, this is interesting because Cabellsville ran through a lot of jails and a lot of rehabilitation episodes to the jail. So if you look at this, she found records in 12 available day books and rule books. Let's see. This one. So the original jail, built on site in 1761, was a 12 by 20 foot brick jail. In 1768, they built a 34 by 16 foot jail to replace the original. And then we know by 1769 that had burned down, and a new jailhouse was ordered on March 17th, 1769, the anniversary is coming around. Then they had 3 requests to repair the jailhouse. Then in 1774, they built a new wooden jailhouse of unknown size. Then later that year, they built a new brick jailhouse, 20 by 12. There were 2 requests for repair. And then a new jailhouse ordered again in 1778. And the sheriff paid people paid to move people to the new jailhouse in 1780. So it was kind of a revolving door of jailhouses, right? And maybe all of them right in that corner of the property over time. So she had concluded that the structure that we found in the garden in 2015 is likely the 1761 all-brick jailhouse. So that would have been the first jailhouse in Cabellsville. The structure that she found in 2018 is different and is likely the 1774 jailhouse based on the amount of brick, which leans more toward a wooden structure with a brick foundation. So you wouldn't have that huge amount of brick. You'd have, some broken up stuff over top of the foundation that we showed in that last picture. So that's how she concluded that. I've got a couple more for you. And part of Jessica's thesis was not just looking at the jail archaeology, but going through the record and looking at the criminal justice system that would have been in place in the county at that time, the types of crimes and punishments and all that kind of stuff. So she went through all the order books and all those things to compile some of those. And so here's a list of some of the individuals and the recorded crimes from the 1760s and 70s. There's some good stuff here. William Giles was the first person to be imprisoned, and he spent a night in the drunk tank during court days after getting in a fight with the sheriff at the tavern. So, not a real good decision. And then you have much more serious. You have the second thing here is Wright and a gang were literally highwaymen who had jumped out of bushes with cloths over their face to rob people on what is today Route 29. So, thank you, Lucky Stars, that's not happening on Route 29, as far as we know. And then we had Daverson, who was the father of Morrison's child, received no punishment, but they punished the woman for having the bastard child. Let's see, then we had any gathering of 3 or more slaves talking together was considered a legal congregation. And then we had, I think she was trying to look into the story about John Gregory who died in the fire at the jailhouse, but I couldn't find any record of that in the official records of the county, John Gregory. So, interesting bunch of stuff. And Jess says, we read the bottom, but she says, sorry I can't be there with you in person, but if you have any questions or want to talk more about the site, please feel free to reach out to me. Cabellsville will always hold a special place in my heart. She put her email at the bottom, if any of you would like to take her up on that. This is her profit email, jgansert@hnp.com. So that's all I've got for you today. If anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer them.
When you found some of the Native American artifacts, did you do any more digging in that area, or were you really concentrating on the Cabellsville jail site?
They were what we call isolated finds. So we had done shovel tests around those, and they were, kind of random things in between. So, in short, no, we didn't do any additional work, but they were probably flakes from, working stone tools, that kind of thing. I don't think we had any actual tools out there. Yeah.
That was my question.
Okay, yeah.
How was the brick made, and where did the brick come from?
Most likely, it would have been made on site in a kiln. We have an abundance of good clay around here, which is one way of saying it, right? We're so lucky. I had to dig up my septic tank yesterday, and it was, anyway, not fun to dig through the clay, but yeah, they would have been making bricks and burning them probably right just off-site someplace. So, and sometimes you can find those locations of the brick clamps if you look for them. Not usually high on the list of things to look for. They're called a clamp. brick clamp.
Just the mold that helps it play together.
No, it's actually, it's the stack of the bricks that have been hand molded and then stacked up to form like a kiln shape. That's called the clamp. And then they'd have to keep a fire going underneath it for several days in a row. So you had itinerant brick makers that would go to plantation to plantation usually and fire these things up and make it from the local clay.
So what's the dimensions of that?
They vary pretty widely. There's one at Poplar Forest that we found. Usually the way you can find them, they're going to, once the brick is burned, they take it away. They're making brick. But you can usually find the location of the fire eyes where they leave holes along the edges where they can shove wood up under there and keep it hot for days at a time. And these leave a signature in the ground. So sometimes you can actually find the burn spot, and sometimes you can pick up through remote sensing techniques where those concentrations of burn are. And oftentimes there'll be little bits of broken brick left behind.
So do you assume that all those jails that were built basically in that same site, did they all burn? Is that what's going on?
I don't think so. I'm not sure what happened with some of them. And it may be that they weren't built well, or maybe they needed a bigger jail. Like they made one with thicker walls, maybe somebody got out. But they probably didn't want to put that in the official records. Somebody got a hole in the wall and took off. So, yeah, somebody back there, I thought. Yeah.
I have a couple of questions. First off, the 1794 map that you mentioned, did that include anything beyond Cabellsville, or is it just essentially a plat for that community?
That map, I think we have the reference. I think it was a bigger map, and I don't know if it was a county map or a state map. We call that the Morrison map, I believe.
I think it was a Civil War map, wasn't it? Civil War survey.
I think Jess called it a 1794. Is the 1794 Morse, M-O-R-S-E, county map showing Cabellsville as the county seat of Amherst.
Can we go back to that on the images?
Yeah. I think that's it right there.
Well, I think it was just Andrews County, or was it county map?
Jess is suggesting it's just Amherst County at the time.
I've not seen the evidence of that.
Yeah, I'd have to verify that, because I'm not familiar with it, and she may have found it, just scrolling through like the David Rumsfeld collection or something like that.
The other thing I think you would be interested in hearing about is the work you've done at New London with the old tavern there.
Oh, yeah.
I think that'd be very interesting to the group here.
Yeah, we've been doing years of work at the tavern site at New London. We've done substantial work to the interior. We excavated the entire basement at this point. The wing, there's a circa 1850 wing. This is the 1763 tavern at New London. It's still standing, that Liberty University purchased. So we've done all the archaeology on that lot. And we have now well over 100,000 18th century artifacts.
And isn't it believed to be the oldest building still standing in Circle Virginia?
We think so. Yeah, we haven't found an older one at this point. Now, if you look at the percent of original material left, you've got a lot of the foundation, a fair amount of the structural framing of the building, but a lot of replacement stuff. So when you drive by that building from the outside, it looks kind of like an early 20th century structure, but they're working on it. Definitely. Yeah.
When did people stop making bricks out of our local red clay?
That's really hard to pinpoint. That's a good question. It's one of these things that You know, we talk about handmade nails, for example. We usually give a cutoff date for about 1800 because that's when the machine to make cut nails starts to be adopted. But, you know, people are still making nails by hand today for specialty purposes. And certainly, you know, people would, if they had a bucket of nails in the barn, from grandpa, they were going to use them when they built something. So we can find structures being built in the later 19th century that has those old wrought nails. So you have to take all the evidence, right? It's the same way with bricks. Like some people are hand making brick yet well into the late 19th century. Although by that point they had machines to do it. It was a lot more economical to put them on a train and ship them places that, back in the early days, there was no way to move hundreds of thousands of pounds of brick around economically, so it was just cheaper to make them in place. But, generally speaking, I think it's the mid to later 19th century when they were using machine production on bricks. And then the sizes change a little bit, so it's more of an art than a science, really. You try to look at all the evidence, accumulation to tell. Yeah?
Where are the artifacts now?
They should all be at the Oakland Museum.
Two coins went back to the Andersons.
That's right, yeah, the Andersons the owners elected to keep a couple of coins. Technically, they owned everything, so they had the perfect right to keep it. So they donated the vast majority of the collection to the museum.
So it's there, someone wants to see it.
On display.
Yeah.
Oh,
So,
We have a new exhibit display of Cabellsville now that will open next Wednesday.
not all of the artifacts, but a large portion of them, or a significant portion, are there on display and will be there for a while.
that's great. Yeah, I'll have to come by and see them. Anybody else?